Hey guys, it's Sam. Welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing the All About My Eyeshadow Palettes tag that was started by Samantha March and Ali Glines probably a couple months ago. It's been a while. Also, this craziness on my face, I just filmed a video using one shadow from every single one of my eyeshadow palettes, so it seemed like the perfect day to do this tag. Nobody asked me to do it, but it's been something that I've been thinking about doing for a while, to be completely honest. But every time that I start going to do this, I get stuck somewhere and I can't pick out a palette. So today I hunkered down and really looked at my palettes and really decided what I wanted to do with it. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. Maybe you guys share some similar things, some similar opinions about my palettes. Let's get started. So the first one is show your newest palette. Now this was kind of unfair to me because I just showed you guys a haul where I got a bunch of new palettes. So for me, I don't have one new palette. I have 5 new palettes, which is excessive, but you know, whatever. I'll show you guys them all. So the first one I have is the Melt Cosmetics Amor Eterno Vita palette. It looks like this. This is the most expensive one of the new ones that I have. I absolutely adore this palette. I think it's amazing. I actually just did a video filming 5 looks using this one palette, so that should already be on my channel. I will link it if you guys are looking for some inspiration to play with this. Melt Cosmetics is a newer brand to me. I find that they make really fun, really bright, really out there palettes, but also really wearable palettes, and their shadow formula is fantastic. Their mattes are so blendable, so pigmented, and their shimmers are just phenomenal. So that is one. The other 4 are all Juvia's Place palettes. I am waiting on one more. I mentioned it in the video where I hauled these that I was supposed to also get the Zulu palette, which they forgot to send me. Now I just want to throw a really quick shout out to Juvia's Place because, you know, I've mentioned it before on my channel that sometimes and I mean, this can be said about any company that you order from online. Some of them are a lot better about responding to customer complaints than others. Juvia's Place, I emailed them. I told them I was missing a palette. They basically just said, send us a picture of what you got, send us the weight from the package, and send us your packing slip. And I did all that, and they were like, we're so sorry we forgot to send you that. The new palette's on our way. We're covering all the shipping and the handling, which I think is the best way to handle it because, of course, you know, there are those people in the world that would say, hey, I didn't get one palette, but maybe you did, but the weight on a package doesn't lie, and they would really be able to easily tell if something was missing. So I have these 4. I'm waiting for the Zulu palette. So I got the Nubian, which is their oldest, palette. It's super neutral, really wearable. I love the formula of these shadows. They're, again, much like the Melt Cosmetics palette, the mattes are super blendable, super pigmented. The shimmers just the same at a fraction of the cost. These are fantastic, and you get pretty big pan sizes, not in all of them, but in some of them. For example, I would say that the Saharan 2 has pretty decent sized pans. They are pretty large. They look like that. Also, the Nubian 2 has bigger pan sizes. This one is my favorite palette that I got from them. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And I also got the Nubian 3 Coral, which is, again, neutrals, but in a more coral kind of a family, and also has some really pretty silvers and grays as well. All right, so the next palette is what is your oldest palette? This took me a little while to think about and really think back and look at all the palettes that I have, but no doubt in my mind, my oldest palette is this one. This is my MAC Burgundy x9 palette. I feel like MAC was one of the first companies way back when to do the monochromatic palettes. They had a Burgundy x9, they had an Amber x9, they had tons of palettes like this. And I mean, nowadays you have every company doing it. Huda Beauty is doing it, ColourPop does it. Who else is doing it right now? The Juvia's Place is putting out a range of the monochromatic ones. So this one was my favorite, and it is still just as good to this day, and they do, I'm pretty sure, still sell this. This was one of my favorite palettes just in terms of you know, taking it with me, traveling. I could always get an absolutely gorgeous look from it. It is neutral enough that you can definitely wear it every single day, but at the same time, it has enough shimmer that you can get a really, really pretty dramatic evening look with it. I absolutely adore this. All right, so the next palette is what is your most expensive palette? I have a tie for this. You guys will already know my most expensive palettes are a couple of my Natasha Denona palettes. So I have these two 15 times one. These are the original size 15s. Now they do make smaller size ones that are more affordable, but still offer the same formula, the same kind of like colors, not the same exact colors, but like the same variety. So you get 15 shades in these. I know that there are some more expensive Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes out there. I don't have them. I have been really tempted to get a couple of them, but then I always back out of it. They actually have a new one that just launched that's already either hasn't quite launched yet or is already sold out on Sephora. It is their new bronze palette. It's a 15 pan mini palette I'm really excited for. So these are $162, but if you go on Sephora right now, I know that this one is on for half price. I think it's only like $81 right now. So if this is something that you've been wanting for a while, jump on there right now and get it. Hopefully it'll still be on sale by the time you guys get to this. Honestly, I am one of those people that does think that Natasha Denona shadow formula is fantastic. I love the mattes. This one is her Tropic palette. I also have the all matte Safari palette, which looks like this. The Tropic one obviously has all the shimmers in it. All of her formulas are fantastic. The color pigmentation is amazing. The blendability, gorgeous. I love her palette stories. I also have like a bunch of the littler ones. I've got the Sunrise. I know the Love palette was really, really popular. I loved the Gold palette, the All Nudes palette. Do I think that they're worth as much as they are? I don't know. It's very... I did pay for these myself. It's not like I get sent PR or anything like that. So, you know, I obviously thought that they were worth the price, but do I think you need to go out there and blow, you know, over $100 on an eyeshadow palette? No, there are other palettes that are just as good of quality that are much, much less expensive. But for me, I use these a ton. I travel with them a lot, which is why this one looks so like busted and like scratched up, if you guys can see that. I do take these with me a lot. One thing I really like is that the hard ones that have like the full plastic cover, and by that I mean not like the old style ones that have the clear cover. These ones are really travel friendly, I find. I just sort of tuck them in between a couple layers of clothes. They're heavy, but they're very thin. They are really hard plastic. They will survive the trip. I've taken them down to Punta Cana with me. I take them away with me on a lot of weekend trips. They're some of my favorite travel palettes. Again, would I spend this much on them? No, maybe wait for a sale or a gift card, but the formula is fantastic if you do end up buying. Now on to my least expensive, or I guess my most affordable palette, I think is what it's called. I'm just like pulling up a video so I have all of the things. And that for me was a toss-up between two, but it ended up being my Wet n Wild Not a Basic Peach palette. So this palette has 10 shadows. I travel with this one a lot too because I really love the color range. I'm a big, big fan of like neutral palettes that have like a pop of blue in it. I think that the shadow formula is fantastic. I always get really, really beautiful looks out of it. I want a couple more of these, but Wet n Wild, at least where I live in Canada, is a little difficult to get a hold of. They only really have it, I know that, do they have it at the Superstore? I don't even know if they have it at my Superstore. I think that they have it at Walmart, but you know, you can't get it at Shoppers Drug Mart, which is where I normally buy my drugstore makeup, so whatever. But these are fantastic. Mickey actually sent me this in one of our makeup swaps a while ago, and I absolutely love it to this day. So this is Show Your Everyday palette. Now for me, particularly lately, I don't have one palette that I reach for every single day. So for me, when I was thinking about which palette is my most everyday palette, I wanted to pick the palette that I thought was the most versatile for any occasion. So it's got cool tones and warm tones, some bright fun colors, some neutral colors, something dark. For me, that was very easily my Urban Decay Born to Run palette. Looks like this. It has got a little bit of everything. There's some blues in it, some pinks, purples, a little bit of oranges, definitely some neutral colors, definitely some dark smoky colors. You can really easily make a really pretty day look, a really natural look, or you can get in here and do something really dark and dramatic and smoky. And the formula of these shadows is just fantastic. This is probably my favorite Urban Decay eyeshadow palette, and that is saying a lot because Urban Decay has some of the best eyeshadow palettes out there, in my opinion. They are also on the monochromatic trend right now. They've got the Naked Honey, the Naked Cherry, the Naked Heat. They recently put out the Naked Ultraviolet. They are amazing, but this one is by far my favorite. And I just think as far as an everyday palette, like for me, that meant like if you could only have like buy one eyeshadow palette and you had to use it every single day, I think that this one is one of the most versatile ones that you would really be happy to use anytime and get any kind of a look out of. Next up is show your most colorful palette. For me, this meant rainbow and bright colors, and it is easily my Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette. This palette has 24 colors in it. And they are super bright, super rainbow. I also filmed a video doing 5 looks out of this palette fairly recently. You definitely can get neutral looks out of this. It is just not easy. It's got literally every single color of the rainbow. I have a couple other like bright, fun, colorful palettes, but none of them are quite like this one. The Jeffree Star formula is incredible. I actually do think that they are completely worth the price that they are valued at. I don't think that they're too expensive. There's definitely more expensive palettes out there, but at the same time, it's not like, you know, you are paying for the formula, which is fantastic. The mattes, the shimmers, super pigmented, super blendable. I think you're gonna find the same thing about like all the palettes I'm showing here, is that I really do stand behind most of them and would recommend them to people. And I absolutely love this. Megan bought this for me for my birthday / Christmas last year, and I love it. I don't use it nearly enough because it is so bright and so crazy, but it is so much fun when I do, and you can really, really be super creative with a palette like this. Okay, next one is show your smallest palette, and for me that is my Natasha Denona mini palettes. Not only do these have the least number of eyeshadows in them, they only have 5, and a lot of my other shadows have at least 6, just in terms of their pan size and like the size of the actual shadows, like the actual palettes themselves. They are teeny tiny, really, really nice quality though. Like they don't feel cheap or like they're gonna break considering how small they are. They're still really expensive. Like I think these itty bitty ones were still $33, which is a little bit ridiculous for the amount of product that you get. But I can't say honestly that I've ever hit pan on any eyeshadow palette, so the chance that I'll actually ever run out of these is slim to none. But these are really tiny. I know that e.l.f. also makes their really, really tiny quad palettes now, and I would really like to try those. But again, much like the Wet n Wild, e.l.f. I've only been able to find at either my Old Navy or at the Superstore, and those quads just haven't made it here yet. I'm wondering if I'm gonna have to buy them online or whatever. So these are definitely my tiniest. Okay, so for this next category, which is show your biggest palette, for me, I thought that there was a little bit, I tried not to watch other people do this because I tried not to pick the same palettes that everybody else picked. I wanted to really be as thoughtful and as original as possible. So for this, for me, there was 2 ways to look at what is your biggest palette, and that is either which palette has the most shadows, which would be my Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette, which has 24 shadows in it, which is why I didn't go that way. I decided instead to do which palette do I own that has the biggest, bulkiest packaging that is impossible to store anywhere. And for me, that is my Urban Decay Game of Thrones eyeshadow palette. While I love Game of Thrones and I love the concept of this palette sucks to store. You have this huge, like it comes with a really nice mirror, and then you lift this up and there is the Iron Throne, and it's a little bit of like the story and stuff, but like it's kind of dumb because the palette itself is like in this little drawer. It has no cover on it. It has 20 shadows in here, which is not light on the shadows, but what annoys me more than anything is that even if I was like, this is nice, but I don't really need it, where else would I store this? It wouldn't be safe anywhere else. It has to go back in the drawer. So this is like the biggest, bulkiest packaging, and I have the collector's box. I bought it as the vault when I got it, but I've been trying not to keep it in there because when I keep it in there, I never use it. So I do still have the box, but this and my Lorac Pirates of the Caribbean eyeshadow palette have been like living on top of a bookshelf lately to be displayed because they are really cool to look at. So thankfully I've kind of found a storage solution, but this is by far like my biggest, bulkiest package. Like just to put it in perspective, like this is this, and this is that Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette. So like, you know, this is wider and stuff, but like the Urban Decay one is longer and it's not that much thinner. So this is giant. So in terms of show your palette with your best memory, honestly, I don't hold a lot of memory to many of my palettes. You know, I love the ones that I do, most of the ones I do have. There's some that I think I love less, but they all serve a part in my collection. So the only one I could really think of that I have a really great memory of is my MAC Mellow Moderns 15 pan eyeshadow palette. They don't make this anymore, but a lot of these colors are part of their regular line, like MAC Carbon and Soft Brown are in here. And I think Cork you can still get. Anyway, that's besides the point. Print, I think, is still part of their regular collection. This eyeshadow palette used to be my go-to for all kinds of travel. It was one of the first eyeshadow palettes I purchased. It was the first large eyeshadow palette I ever purchased. The memory that I hold with this is I was part of one of my best friend's weddings in BC a couple years ago. It wasn't a couple years ago. It was a while ago. It was probably in like 2016, I believe. So I guess holy crap, 4 years ago, and we had to do our own makeup. So this is the palette that I brought to do my makeup because no matter what you're going for, much like that Urban Decay one, there is a little something in here. And particularly for me, I am really drawn towards green shadows. I wore a lot of purples at the time because my eyes were green and I thought that that was the way that I was supposed to go. It's got some darker colors to make a more dimensional look, some neutrals to make a really neutral look. I still to this day love this palette. I'm bummed out that they don't like offer it as this way anymore, but like I said, they have enough similar colors now that you could definitely make either this exact one or one pretty close. But that is the only palette that really holds a really good memory for me, is this one, because this is the one back when I didn't have as much makeup that I used to travel with that has been through thick and thin with me. So that is the one with the best memory because I wore it at my friend Courtney's wedding, who I miss dearly because I haven't seen her since then. All right, so this was probably the most difficult category for me. This is a show a palette that you think is worth the hype. And honestly, the only palette that I really can think of that has a lot of hype associated with it is some of the Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes, and I only have one, and that is the Modern Renaissance palette. It is so dirty, and because it's like that velvet, there's nothing I can do about it, so I'm just gonna have to suffer through that. Especially after I filmed my 5 palettes, 1 look video, 5 looks, 1 palette video with this eyeshadow palette, I really gained a new respect for it in its versatility, its pigmentation, its blendability. So I actually do think that this one is worth the hype. And I watched a lot of videos on a lot of her other palettes because the Soft Glam palette came out, the Norvina palette came out, the Riviera palette came out. What else has there been? The Sultry palette. A ton of different palettes came out, and oh, the Subculture palette. And their formula was really soft and really crumbly, and a lot of people were having a problem with it, but I have never had a problem with this palette, and I can't remember ever hearing about anybody that had a problem. Like, I think that this is one of the ones that they did right. Now, obviously, if this is not your kind of color scheme, this isn't gonna be a hyped palette for you, but it works really well for me. I do really like the way that the pinks are, because I do have a problem wearing some pinks and some reds on my eyes because I find that they make my eye look a little bloodshot. They bring out the redness in my eyes and my under eye. But for some reason, these ones just don't. Like, they're that exact right shade that it just works perfectly. It's mostly like mattes or satin shadows, which is really easy to build a super, like, I don't personally like using only foiled or only shimmer shadows in a look. For me, they are like a finishing touch. So for me, having 2 is perfect in this palette. I really, really, really like this. And it's nice. It comes with a little brush. I think that this is still available. I'm like 95% sure it is. And a lot of her other palettes are limited edition. So this one, I think, definitely worth the hype. Now on to some palettes that are not, in my opinion, worth the hype. Now, this again was really difficult for me because, like I said, I don't really pay attention to hyped up palettes, but I'm more thinking of, you know, a brand that is very, very well known for being super high end, for being very expensive, and so you would think would have an amazing formula. And I don't want, like, please don't give me any hate for this, but I'm going to say my Marc Jacobs iconic palettes. So I have 2. I have Editorial and I have Stiletto. Now, when I filmed the video for this, I did discover that I really like the way that the blacks play in this palette. So there are a couple darker shades in these palettes. I'm talking here on this one, and there is like a true black in this one as well. But to be honest, they are expensive. They are $65 for 7 shadows. So that ends up being like $9.28 per shadow. The shadow sizes are not huge. Honestly, I've tried to use these in videos. They create nice looks, but they are very difficult to blend, in my opinion. They're very pigmented, but once you get them on, you really have to work at them to get them to look nice, look blended, look seamless. They're just a little too difficult for how much I paid for them. Again, I paid for them myself. I own them. That's on me. I do like the colors in here. I really liked using some of the darker colors as eyeliners, especially because you don't need to blend out eyeliner. It can be as pigmented as you want it to be when you put it on. But for some other purposes, these are not my favorite. I know people do love them. I know people collect them, but I just personally think that there are other palettes out there that are, you know, less expensive, with formulas that are better, that are more blendable, with, you know, color stories that are similar or, you know, better. And even like things like Natasha, Denona, for me, as much as those are like so much more expensive, the formula is just so much better that those are going to be my most overhyped palettes. So we are down to the last 2. So this one is show your favorite palette from a favorite brand. One of my favorite brands, other than MAC, which is my all-time favorite brand, and I actually don't have that many MAC palettes anymore. I find that they, like, I have a lot of their single shadows, but I don't have a ton of palettes anymore. But another company that I love, and I love a lot of their products, is Too Faced, and my favorite Too Faced palette is the Gingerbread Spice palette. Now, I know that this was limited edition. They don't make it anymore, but I just adore it. From what I understand from videos I've watched, the color scheme in this is vaguely similar to the Chocolate Gold palette, which I believe is still available. I just love these colors. It's super neutral, super spicy, I suppose is the word. There's a ton of shimmer in here. You get some fun, bright colors. This gumdrop color is absolutely gorgeous, really pigmented. And I love the smell of this palette. I just think for me, for, like I said, the kind of colors that I tend to reach for, you know, I've got those greens and those purples, the golds, the neutrals in here with a bit of color. This one is by far my favorite Too Faced palette. I haven't had a ton. I never had like any of the chocolate bar palettes. I kind of came to this brand really, really late. But I adore this one, and this is one that will never leave my collection. I just love it so much. The last palette is my most used palette, and for me, this was kind of a toss-up and a tie. So in terms of which palette do I actually use most often as of right now, it would be my Too Faced Just Peachy Mattes palette. But having said that, I use this as sort of an accompaniment palette, because a lot of palettes that have some of those neutral brown shades I find are missing a shade of brown somewhere. This one kind of has all of them. It's got your really light brown for a good crease color, your orangey brown, little darker, the darkest brown at the bottom. So for me, this is always an accompaniment palette. I never really just use this palette on its own anymore. But for when other palettes are missing a certain color, this is the one I reach for. So what is actually the palette I use the most, this one. In terms of which palette has the most damage because I've actually used every single color the most, it is hands down, no question about it, my Tartelette Toasted palette. It is a super neutral palette. You can see that it has got a ton of love. I've lost shadows. I've repacked shadows from here. Again, has anything hit pan? No. But for a long time, this was like the only palette I would use. And much like that Too Faced Peachy Mattes palettes, just Peachy Mattes palettes, whatever, tons of neutrals in here. Really, really good as an accompaniment palette, but also really, really pretty as a standalone palette as well. So that is me doing the All About My Eyeshadow Palettes tag. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was really fun for me to get to go through my palettes and remember certain things about them and actually relook at them and decide which ones were my favorite and look around and see which other palettes I'm happy to own but that don't really hold a special place in my heart. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Comment down below, let me know your feelings about some of these palettes. Which other palettes would you have put in certain categories, or if you have filmed this palette tag, link it down below. I've really been enjoying watching everybody else's videos. But like I said, I did stop when I decided to film this because I wanted it to be my own decisions and not to let other people influence me and be like, oh yeah, that palette. So if you guys enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. I will catch you guys next time. Bye.